Welcome to the Ryan Frank Podcast. Ryan is a family man, first and foremost, but he's also a pastor, publisher, and serial entrepreneur. This podcast will help you think, work, and create like never before.
Welcome to the Ryan Frank Podcast. This is Ryan Frank, and thank you so much for tuning in. Today's topic is such an important one. We're going to talk about how to get past hurts of the past and how to move from having a survival mindset to a thriving mindset. I had the opportunity to sit down with Pastor Nicole Crank. I first met David and Nicole a few years ago at the Kids Matter conference. David and Nicole Crank are the co-founders and lead pastors of faithchurch.com. This is a multi-site church with over 20,000 members. They are doing amazing kingdom work. And Nicole Crank is an amazing kingdom worker. She is an author, a speaker, a pastor, a blogger, and so much more. And I'm so honored that she was willing to sit down with me and talk about getting past pains of the past. And with God's help, moving into a bright future. In this podcast, Nicole gets very vulnerable as she shares part of her story and how God has helped her get through that and not just survive it, but move to thriving with His help. Now, when we get into the podcast, those of you that are watching on YouTube, you're going to see that the background changes. This is, I think, the first podcast this year that I have not recorded the interview here in my studio. Because of the demands of life, I had this meeting scheduled with Nicole, and I was unable to make it to the studio, and so I actually recorded this in the upper level of my in-laws' house. And so I'm at my mother and father-in-law's upstairs, but I think we're not in the studio, but I think you'll see and hear just fine. I love everything that Nicole had to share. I appreciate, again, her vulnerability and her heart to help people. And then I love at the end, we kind of wrapped up with a fun little conversation about vision boards, which totally unrelated to the topic of the podcast, but something that Nicole and I have talked about in the past. So you want to make sure to hear what we had to say at the end about vision boards, something that you should be putting into practice in your life. Well, friends, thanks again for tuning in. Let's get this show on the road. Here is my conversation with Nicole Crank. Hey, what's up, Pastor Nicole? How are you doing?
Hey, I'm really excited to be here. We had scheduled collisions of life and we finally orbited in the same place.
We did. We've been trying to do this for about 10 years and we finally pulled it together. So maybe not 10 years, but we have tried for a few months. And thank you for joining us. Nicole, for someone that maybe doesn't know you or your family or your ministry, would you take a few minutes and just tell us about your ministry journey and what your week-to-week ministry looks like?
Well, people ask me how I got into ministry, and my very theological answer is God tricked me.
Did He trick you? Yes.
He tricked me. I was in the corporate world, really happy, making great money. And my husband was the son of a preacher man, head of a church of 180 people. His dad was in his 50s. He was going to be preaching our whole lives. We were going to, serve at the church, support the church. And then his dad went to heaven unexpectedly at 56 years old.
Oh, wow.
And we said, okay, what do we need to do to be here for the people?
Yeah.
And that was how I got into ministry, is just how do we be here for the people right now?
That's crazy.
And our prayer was, how do we hold together this church of 180-ish people?
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny is when you look at the supernatural, I've heard, the cliche is, well, God will put His super on your natural. And I think, we think our natural has to be kind of pretty, right? Mm-hmm. And ain't nobody seen my natural hair. And if I have it, you won't see my natural lashes or my natural nails because my natural ain't cute. And our natural doesn't have to be good for God to use it. It just has to be there. And so when we were hoping to keep together a church of 180 people, God started blessing what we were doing. And as we were chasing God and being there for people, our church of 180 in 2 years turned to a church of 2,000. We opened up a second campus in Earth City. We'd never heard of anybody opening a second campus. We just thought this was new and strange and what God was telling us to do.
Yeah.
We thought it was a thing. And it was 125,000 square feet, and our church grew 103% that next year.
Wow.
And then God told us to go to Florida. What? Go to Florida? How is that even possible? Like, how are we going to even afford plane tickets for me and my husband? So we got the Southwest credit card because you could get the companion pass and like going free. We're like, that's how we'll do it. But like staff, buildings, nothing made sense. As with God, if it makes sense, it's not faith, because we have to serve God in the impossible to please him. And we started a church in Florida, and then he told us to start another campus up here. So we did that, and things just kept unfolding. I was our executive pastor. Once we started Florida, I started speaking at our church every weekend for like 5 years until we got the technology to catch up with the speed of what we were doing. And God just kept unfolding things, and we just kept saying yes, even though it sounded crazy and impossible every single time. And right now we're opening 2 more campuses. We've moved from executive pastor to directional leadership team because we need more help. And as we move into our 9th campus, we're just a couple of kids that we're hoping to be there.
Yeah. To God be the glory. So if you're not familiar with Faith Church, go check it out. It's faithchurch.com. Pastors David and Nicole Crank, and they just have a wonderful, wonderful ministry and a huge vision. And Nicole, I'm so honored that you've joined us today. There's a million things we could have talked about, and I know we've done webinars in the past and have done online events in the past, and you've got so much to share. But today, as we talk to ministry leaders in particular who are watching or listening to the podcast, I want to talk about pain, because the reality is, as much as we would like, pain is just inevitable, isn't it? And a few years back, you wrote a book called I Will Thrive. And it has on the cover, I will survive, but then over that, thrive. And you believe that it is possible, even during pain and hurt, not to just survive, but thrive, right? Will you tell us why you wrote that book and why this is such a passion point of yours to help people understand?
Well, when I said that God tricked me into ministry, I also mean it because I had a severe set of limiting beliefs in my life. And that's one of the things that I was actually consulting with a church yesterday with their senior pastor, talking about the limiting beliefs that they're bumping their head on as they're going multi-campus. Because I was given up my dad before I was born in Canada. I was adopted in the US when I was 3. I was molested when I was in 4th grade, which is the same year that I found out that I was adopted. So then like these people didn't love me, and these people abused me. Lived in a little country town. We were a poor family, one working parent. He worked at the factory where everybody got laid off, ate out of our garden, drove a wrecked car as our vehicle, and got made fun of like crazy because word of what happened to me, I finally confided in my best friend in 5th grade what happened, and worked it out, and everybody made fun of me. My parents, we would get these prank phone calls. My parents would be like, what was that about? And I would just lie and go, I don't know. And then I would go to my room and cry. And then when I was 13 years old, there was in 8th grade, there was a guy doing community service at our junior high. Let's just pause and think about the wisdom of the plan that they had there.
Not smart.
But I ended up raped when I was 13 years old, and I didn't tell anybody. We moved, switched schools, counties, school districts, cities. I got a new lease on life, and I didn't know that people could like me, that boys did think I could be cute. And so I handled the attention all the wrong ways. And I ended up a pregnant unwed mother at 17 years old. So I felt like life had failed me to that point. But at that point, I failed myself, and didn't know really where to go from there. Ended up meeting a guy a few years later, high cheekbones, bodybuilder, right medical initials after his last name. And I couldn't believe he'd be a girl like me with all the baggage that I had going on. Married him 13 months later. And 3 weeks after we got married, he disappeared for the first time. I had spent 13 months of engagement telling him, hey, I have done so many things wrong in my life. When I get married, I want it to last forever. Are you sure you want to be married to a girl like me?
Yeah.
And I guess he was so confident that I wouldn't leave. He wasn't worried about what he was going to do.
Mm.
So he ended up getting addicted to prescription medication, which turned into cocaine, which turned into crack cocaine.
Mm.
He ended up with 3 felony convictions, and I ended up with a foreclosure, a bankruptcy, and basically homeless.
Mm.
So when I met a guy named David Crank, who told me his dad was a preacher, he was in ministry. I was going to church. I went to church twice on Sunday morning, Sunday night with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's great. You'll do ministry. I'll live in the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just knew, based on what had happened to me and I had done, what had happened because of me, that I wouldn't qualify to be able to serve a God like we have, on a level like he's allowed me to.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is you're natural, bad grammar, but ain't got to be pretty.
That's right.
For God to put a super on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And I don't know if I knew all that about your story, Nicole, but what a picture of God's grace and the fact that you can move from the pain and you can move from just trying to survive to really thriving. And I know that this is a topic that obviously we could spend hours and hours talking about, but what word of encouragement would you give someone, Nicole, who, as you're telling your story, they think about past struggles or past hurts, and they would love to see a future filled with hope, and they would love to see purpose in their life. What kind of encouragement would you share with them? How do you get to that point?
I'm going to start with a sentence, and then I'm going to break it down just a little bit. And the sentence I would start with, God is not obligated to heal a hurt that you don't give him. And Ryan, the Lord spoke that to me when I was writing the book, I Will Thrive, because the word survive is ripped off the page for thrive to show up.
Yes.
And fought with God over that statement for a minute. I was like, what? Wait, God, like, no, you do heal. He's like, anything you don't give me, I don't have my hands on.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, especially since you said we're speaking with ministry leaders, as leaders, people deal with, I hate the word church hurt, because it's not church hurt. It's just hurt. People get hurt at Walmart. People get hurt at home. People get hurt with friends. People get hurt at church. But it's not just people that get hurt at church. Leaders, we get hurt at church, right?
Yeah.
We pour our hearts out into dream teamers, congregation members, staff members, and then they transition or move or make a change, and it blows us away, and we're taken off guard. Our heart's on our sleeve. We get hurt. So what do? We just pull a little chink in the armor, guard our hearts a little bit. And then we lie to ourselves with, well, the Bible says, guard your heart with all diligence. And like, that's our excuse for having prison walls around our heart, except for the Bible says, guard your heart with all diligence. So it means you know what to guard your heart against, but then you still have to have an open and tender heart, right? You have to let the bad roll off like a duck's back, but you still have to be able, if we're going to be in ministry, we got to be able to still throw our hearts out there, even though somebody's done a tap dance on it. And what happens is we get in a cycle of pain. Maybe we make some bad choices. Maybe we start drinking too much coffee, or going home and having too many glasses of wine, or we get a wandering eye, or we find a physical or biological stress relief through medication or something that we know it doesn't line up with God's best for our life. Then we start discounting that we should even be a leader because we know what we're doing when nobody else is looking. Yeah. And then we end up in a cycle of self-sabotage, and we wonder why things are going wrong. And really, Ryan, what I've learned, we're a spirit, soul, and body, right? We're a triune being. Most people understand that, especially ministry leaders. But God explained it to me this way. We're theology, spirit, psychology, that's the soul, right? The mind, the will, and the emotions, and biology. So he gave me the ologies: theology, psychology, and biology. And so now when I'm looking at anything in the word, I try and come at it from all 3 points.
That's good.
And the thing about limiting beliefs, what I found out about the biology and it's kind of gets into psychology. I don't know. Did you know this? That 95% of our thinking is on autopilot, and we're 100% unaware of 95% of our thinking.
That's crazy.
Blows me away.
Yeah.
And the reason is our brain burns 20% of our calories for a whole body, right? So here's what I was thinking. I was thinking, okay, so I can just start thinking about working out more, and I don't have to actually work out, right?
Yeah.
Except for it doesn't work exactly like that.
No.
But the brain is so stingy with its time and its resources because it knows it's finite, and the calories that it burns, it puts as much on autopilot as possible. If it's on autopilot, called subconscious, and we're unaware of it, the way God revealed it to me in the theology part is we're operating in the dark. Well, where does the enemy play?
Yeah.
He plays in the dark, right?
The dark.
So we have to bring light to the darkness.
Yep.
So I'm working on writing a book on limiting beliefs. And what I work with people on in my masterminds is the FAR program: find, address, and reprogram. So some questions, ministry leader, I would ask you to ask yourself, when you're unhappy with the way you feel, when you're unhappy of maybe a way you react, maybe you broke down and cried and you're like, what the heck was that about? Or maybe you snapped off in a meeting, like, what are you guys doing? We don't do it that way. And you're like, well, that wasn't a overreaction, but you don't want to admit it in public because then other people would know.
Right.
But like, what is the source? So my thing is this: if you're reacting in those ways, asking ourselves the question, what was I really feeling? Because Ryan, a lot of times anger is really a cover-up emotion that I have used. Oh, boo, 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 boo. You start messing with me, I would get angry in a second to protect my heart.
Yep.
And anger really, most of the time, covers up fear or insecurity. So in learning how to survive, you asked one question, so I'm gonna be quiet now.
No, that's good.
In learning how to work on those places that I've been hurt in life, I would say, ministry leaders, ask yourself, why did I react in anger? Why did I react in tears? What am I really feeling? Or maybe even, if you're so brave, what am I really afraid of?
Yeah. And you talk about that. Go ahead, Nicole.
And if we can begin to get honest, that's the hard part. Vulnerability.
You talk about fear quite a bit in the book, and you wouldn't think that ministry leaders or pastors deal with fear, but a lot of them do. And what would you say to someone who they're hung up with fear, and they can't seem to let go of it, and it seems to get the best of them? They try to release this fear, give it to the Lord. It's like it just stays with them. Is it possible to overcome fear? Yes or no? And what would you say to someone who just constantly battles fear in their life?
So I would say, yes, it is possible to overcome fear. And in the same breath, everyone is afraid of something. And leaders are the worst. Because we're all afraid, right? So limiting beliefs, we're afraid of imposter syndrome. Like, we can't even believe ourselves that either somebody's put us in this position, or the church has grown this much, or the kids ministry has grown this much, or we've been given this much authority and responsibility, and we're afraid we're going to screw it up. That's a fear, right? So we have this imposter syndrome. We have this fear that we're not good enough. We have this fear of knowing what our limiting beliefs and our doubts are in the back of our head. So everybody fears something.
Yeah.
Everybody. So just know you're normal.
That's
first of all.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And then figuring out if the fear is a limiting belief, or if that you're being stalked by a spirit of fear. For God has not given you a spirit of fear. The fear is not from the Lord, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Right. So is this actually a demonic attack of fear, an attack from hell on you in the specific space? Or is this just some of your past, some of your doubts, some of your skepticism? And it's hard. God is not obligated to heal a hurt that you won't give him.
Yeah.
And so we can't
That's a good
beat
point.
our fears if we won't articulate our fears. Here's what I'm not saying. I wouldn't call a staff meeting and say, guys, here's what I'm afraid of.
Right.
But I would find a coach, peer, counselor, friend, mentor, somebody who's been where you've been. Never get your advice from someone who has not walked in your path. But
100%.
somebody who's been where you've been. And then if you know that they will hold your cards close to their vest, share with them. I think there's a couple things that I might be afraid of that I'm not even admitting to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Can I have your ear for 5 or 10 minutes and air this out? Tell me what you hear so that we can put a plan together. So we put a plan together with the two of us to maybe beat this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I address limiting beliefs, I do the find, because that you got to find them first. You can't hang on the wall. You can't have as a trophy what you haven't hunted. So you have to know what you're even looking for. So we have to find them, and then we address them. So once we figure out what the fear is, my fear is people are going to leave me like everybody else did, right?
Yeah.
My fear is, gosh, I'm not good enough to keep this thing going because, I had a good thing going and high school was going great and I ended up pregnant. I had a good thing going and I ended up molested. I had a good thing going. My husband chose drugs over me, so 26 years, I celebrated my 26th wedding anniversary last night.
That's awesome.
And I still look at my husband and I'm like, you still want me, right?
Yeah, exactly. Please. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
So we have to address those fears. So we have to set up ways to address the fears. When I work with limiting beliefs and addressing them, there's 5 bonds to break. And one is our core belief. What do we really believe? One is breaking those emotional bonds, identifying what those emotions are so we can identify them and start changing our emotional state when we find ourselves there. Another one is the physical body, because the neurons that fire together wire together. And so we've lived this cycle so many times. We see somebody walking, or we get the text that says, Pastor, can I get a few minutes of your time? And you're like, oh, great, they're quitting. Like you flash, start sweating. You're like, what am I going to do? You're in anxiety. And they just wanted to tell you they're pregnant.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So those biological responses are literally hardwired into the body. So we have to start working on changing those hardwired responses, because our biology, you can't just address the theology part of it. You have to go back and address the biology part of it, or we never break it. And then there's faith and convictions. Like, what are those things that we believe about ourselves that causes us to act a certain way in meetings or in life? Like, do we believe that I am stupid, or I am worthless, or I am not worthy of this position, or I am too tired to do this anymore? So dealing with those faith and those convictions that are there too. So we deal with the beliefs, the emotions, the faith, convictions, physiology, or the physical body, the physiology, and then the belief system.
Yeah. Boy, Nicole, this is so good. Don't you? I feel like a lot of times when we're going through pain or trauma or fear, a lot of this that we're talking about, by default, we isolate, we get by ourselves. And you've been saying, I've heard you say it several times, like, hey, get a coach, get in a small group, get some people around you. Have you found, as you look back over your life and where God has led you to this point by his grace, do you attribute a lot of that to the fact that you chose, I'm not going to hide in a corner and be alone, but I'm going to surround myself with the right people?
I have a coach. I don't talk to my coach every week anymore. I talk to my coach most weeks, at least 2 out of the month.
Okay.
And I like having a coach that is not in my organization, because then I can say all the things.
That's right. And it's all good. Yep.
And I'm not being judged in my next meeting, right? So I can say, I think I really blew it there. And then people aren't looking at me going, yeah, I think she blew it there. Yeah, she's right. No. I can say all the things. I can get input. I can get feedback, and I can be honest. So we lead a cohort of pastors of about 30 some odd pastors that we pastor, and fostering a community among those pastors is one of our big things, so that we can be vulnerable. We tried to lead vulnerably, especially by leading leaders, so that leaders can be vulnerable among their peers. And then there's a couple people right now, Ryan, this is one of the reasons I went on the trajectory of really diving into this limiting belief thing, because my husband and I have worked with a lot of pastors who have fallen or self-sabotaged. I'm working with a couple of pastors right now in different cities that the marriage split like pretty suddenly, like affairs had happened.
Yeah.
How do you get to affair? And it shouldn't even surprise the person who had the affair. Like, there are warning signs that we are squashing, that we're not addressing, that we're afraid to say to somebody. So I would say whoever you get coached by or whoever you talk to, you've got to find that one person that you can say, I'm having crazy thoughts. Like, I am stressed and thinking I need to just go have a wild time, and that will make me feel better. And it makes me nervous. Like, I might do it, so that somebody can try and talk us off the ledge before we've already jumped.
Yeah. When did you first get a coach, Nicole? Like officially, like hire a coach?
So it took me too long. So in 2019, things really started changing in ministry for me. I had been preaching every weekend at Faith Church. I would preach one state. My husband would preach another state. Be in the same office all week in one of the states. I would leave on Saturday. He would preach here. I would preach there. After Sunday after church, he would catch up. We'd be here. We'd just do it like that.
Yes.
I was also the executive pastor of our church. So I didn't have time for a coach.
Right.
I was busy. And I got crispy. I got burnt.
Yeah.
I stopped being as nice as I needed to be. I didn't have time to value my family or my marriage on the level that I needed to. I didn't have time to value people. I didn't have time to value me. I didn't have time to value anything. I was working like 8 a.m. to midnight every single day. Trying to keep up with the blessing that God has given us. So we restructured. And we moved to a directional leadership team. We took my job, we divided it in 5 and worked on hiring people for that directional leadership team.
Nice. Yep.
Then when that happened, I thought, I'm going to have more time to preach. We finally got the technology to catch up because one of our locations in Florida was portable, so we couldn't stream in and out of it. So we had to be live at 850 seats. The school let us in finally after years, and we were able to stream. So once all that happened, we didn't have to do what we did before. So I found myself in a position of, now what? What does life look like now? And that's when I needed a coach. I needed somebody to bounce some ideas. That's when I realized I needed a coach. I probably needed a coach way before then, because I had some work to do at that point. I had to go back and repair and restore relationships that I had not been as good a friend to people as they had been to me.
Okay. Yes. Well, Nicole, for years, I have told pastors and ministry leaders, you need a coach. Athletes have coach, executives have coaches. You get serious about your weight, you're going to get a coach. Somebody tells your kid that, they have potential in soccer, you're going to hire them a coach. But as pastors, we don't have coaches. And like six or 8 months ago, Beth, my wife, said, Ryan, you talk about that all the time, but who's your coach? And I really, all these years I've talked about a coach, Nicole, and I'd never had a coach. Like, there are people that I can call. There's always people you can call and pick their brain. But as far as like really investing, we're like, I'm going to start, you can start hitting my credit card every month. I'm going to make a financial investment and a time investment. And it's been huge over the last 6 or 8 months. And what you said a few minutes ago, that I waited too long. I wish a decade ago I would have got a coach, because it really is incredible how not only can you have a sounding board, but somebody to keep you accountable and be like, okay, it's time to, you've been thinking about these 3 things. It's time to pick one of them and execute and go. And I'm a big believer, everybody does better with a coach. Everybody does. So find one, right?
Yes.
Nicole, as we wrap up, I know you need to go. I always like to end the podcast by asking 2 questions. First, I would love to hear from you. What's your favorite story in all 66 books of the Bible? I know. Think about it. What's the favorite story? And maybe it's your favorite right now.
Yeah, I can't pick a favorite dessert. And I can't pick a favorite Bible story.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've got two I can switch together with one character.
Okay.
And that one character is Hagar.
Mm.
And I was kind of blown away the more I started digging into Hagar. And why Hagar? Because she's the first one to give God this name of, you're the God who sees.
Mm.
And so no matter where you're at,
That's good.
he sees you. He sees you. And that's what I think, even as ministry leaders, like, oh my gosh, we're carrying so much. And oh my gosh, I'm so stressed out. And oh my gosh, COVID. And oh my gosh, post-COVID. And oh my gosh, political climate. And oh my gosh, racial tension. He sees you.
He sees you. Yeah.
He sees you. And he saw her in such a fashion that I love the research on, I don't know if it was a Christophany or not. And a Christophany is when Christ actually appears to somebody prior to Christ being on the planet.
Yeah.
But it says it could have been. It says that the Jewish tradition says it was, that it was Jesus that appeared to her. But he sees so much. He like showed up.
Mm.
And so that blows me away. But then a tiny piece of history on how she got there. I didn't realize. So there were two times, right, that Abram and Sarah were walking through Egypt, and Pharaoh and different kings pulled. And in one of those cases, we know that the king didn't touch Sarah, and he was very thankful. But in the other case, it doesn't say that she wasn't touched.
Mm.
And in the other case, Abram kind of sold her out.
Yeah, he did.
And in that case, if you read the Hebrew tradition, it says that the Pharaoh gave them a daughter of his as repayment. And it says that daughter was Hagar. So what I never realized in all my years of ministry is Sarah gave to her husband what potentially Sarah had given up to somebody else.
Yeah.
Why did she say, take Hagar, take the Pharaoh's daughter, let her carry our child? Because maybe, I'm not saying Sarah did, I'm not saying she did or she didn't. I'm saying as I dive into the history, it's very unclear, but maybe her limiting beliefs were, maybe she didn't, but maybe she's just like, I got too close.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Hagar came from being a princess to a servant, servant who was given up. So her whole life was radically devastated before she got to that desert.
Yeah.
And God saw her, and he cared, and he showed up.
Yeah. And what an amazing thing. It's the same God we serve today, right? And he sees you, and he sees me. And that's so amazing. I love that story. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that back to my mind. That's so good. Now I want to go back and I want to read everything about Hagar, because boy, what a powerful story. All right.
What a woman.
For real. Final question, Nicole, I'd love to hear something that you're working on right now. What's something big that Pastor Nicole Crank's working on right now?
I've started these masterminds, Ryan, and I was a little bit worried about the time drain they would be on me, because I do 3 immersives a year with each group.
Okay.
And what I've realized is when I go in with these groups, for me, it's like breathing air. And what's really cool is the very thing I'm pouring out, I'm getting refilled at the same time.
How neat.
And so it's just, I didn't know what God was doing when he asked me to start them. I had to do a lot of research and a lot of prayer. I don't get a lot of visions from the Lord. He showed me a picture of what it was going to look like. Yeah. And I thought I was doing it for other people, but the way God always does, I figured out in the end, it wasn't just for other people. It's for me. So they're blowing me away, and they're growing. I'm leading the program, and they're growing me in ways that I never even knew that they would or could.
That's pretty. So are these master classes for leaders? Are they for, who are they for?
No, they're for leaders. And like some of the folks that are coming into one of my next ones is the CEO of Miss America is coming in. There's a sports figure who runs a lot of businesses, and his strategist is going to be working with us.
Oh, neat.
I work with a lot of senior pastors in groups. There's a CEO and a senior VP in the corporate world, but then entrepreneurs, owners of clothing shops, people starting their own, writing, people who want to write books. So people who have diverse interests, which is so much fun because we get to coach them in a group setting where they're getting to live their dreams. And then as they learn things I didn't know about the industry or the field they're in, I get to learn so much stuff.
Does that intimidate you any? Like, dang, how do I talk to this person or this person? Or do you just go at it like with confidence?
So the first group that I ever led, I came in and at the end of the program, I knew what I was doing for the curriculum because the Lord had kind of given me this picture, this vision. So I knew where we were. Our year was wrapping up together, and at our last immersive, they said, "Okay, what are we doing next year?" And I said, I don't have a curriculum for next year. Sorry. And they said, "We don't care. We want to do another year." Like 100% of the people in the group, we want to do another year, come up with a curriculum. And I said, okay. And then I panicked. And then as we started the next year, as we did our first Zoom call, I got on with everybody and I said, just so you know, y'all are making me panic. Like, I know what I'm doing. And so what I just try to do is lead with vulnerability so that people know whether you're starting your business. I know you don't know how to do this thing. You've never done it before. That's why they call it new, you know, or you're trying to write your book and you don't know what to put on paper. I get it. Like, I understand. Just put something on paper and then edit it or revise it or even throw it away. But if we don't try new things, we don't get new blessings.
100%. That's a good point. Nicole, is there a website where people can go to learn more about your books and your masterminds and just everything that you have going on, links to your church? What's the best place to find all that?
Well, thanks a million, Ryan. It's just NicoleCrank.com.
Okay.
And I love helping people. I love how you help people. I love how you help kids ministry. I love how you poured into leaders and like you've opened yourself up more to get poured into. And I just pray over you and your heart that you have to help ministry leaders specifically. And I'm just super thankful for it.
Well, thank you, Nicole. You know, one thing you and I did some online event together 2 or 3 years back, and you talked about something that I still use. And if you go, I've got one of them hanging in my office at home, one of them hanging in our insurance office, one at my office at Kids Matter, and that is a vision board. You talked about a vision board. Do you still use vision boards?
I love vision boards.
Good. Well, you've got me hooked on them. I'm a believer.
Photoshop and AI make vision boards the most fun.
That's a good point. Yeah. Will you take in our last 2 minutes, just tell everybody what's a vision board and why you love vision boards?
Well, you have to see it to be it.
Yes, that's true.
A vision brings clarity of life. And if you can't see it clearly, especially you leaders, if it's mist in the pulpit, it's fog in the pews.
Yep.
And if you can, AI is so real to the brain, right? So I do the ologies, and here's the biology part. AI is so real to the brain.
Yeah.
Your body will physically react to what it sees on goggles. You will cut, you can feel, you will sway, you will move. Because what the brain sees, the brain doesn't know it's real, it perceives. So even real life is AI.
Yeah.
So if you put these pictures up, you are giving artificial intelligence to the brain.
That's
to say,
true.
That's me winning my Pulitzer Prize. That's me holding me on the bestsellers list. That's me preaching a church that has 1,000, 2,000 to whatever your number is, people in it. That's me with a staff of X number of people sitting around a table while we're brainstorming. That's me. Your brain sees it so much, your brain starts to perceive it and believe it.
That's so true. That's so true. So, hey, if you don't have a vision board, get one, make one. Nicole, we talked about this, and I went and I made one, and I decided to put one at home and at my office, and I look at it every day. And, you know, I do believe that you walk toward and you move toward what you focus on. And so, hey, this has been a great conversation, Pastor Nicole. Thank you so much. You and your husband and your family are just a blessing to so many. And I'm grateful to be able to call you a friend. So thank you for your time on the podcast today.
I'm so thankful, Ryan. I love talking. You're so easy to talk to. You're wonderful at what you do, and keep do more of it.
Well, thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
This episode of the Ryan Frank podcast has ended, but be sure to subscribe for more conversations to help you stay on the leading edge. And if you like what you've heard, please rate this podcast with 5 stars. Thanks so much, and we will talk to you next time.